You might be a fan of people like Idom, Punk, Daigo, you name it, but according to one former Capcom staff member I spoke with, if the Capcom battle design team were allowed to enter an official tournament, it would be a bloodbath. And he wouldn't be sure who would win among the entire FGC or Capcom's internal staff.
I'm not so sure these people did a good job, considering that you are building on your understanding of the last, whatever it was, 25 years at the time, or 22 years. You're correcting some problems from the most recent game, but then all of a sudden you're okay with having anti-air jabs and having throw loops and having this input lag, and a lot of the things that I would have assumed would have been day one things that they would have figured out and said, oh yeah, this is something that we've learned a long time ago isn't okay, we're in the game. So, yeah.
I actually have a perfect response to that one from... All right. Moving on, John, I wanted to talk about a hidden team at Capcom who has a gigantic influence on Street Fighter. And we need to hear more from this team because they're a little bit too hidden, kind of thing. That's what's going on here. So this team is called the Battle Design Team, and it's their job to play fighting games a lot. Apparently, they're insanely great at the game given the time that they're putting in, and yeah, they should be. You might be a fan of people like Idom, Punk, Daigo, you name it, but according to one former Capcom staff member I spoke with, if the Capcom battle design team were allowed to enter an official tournament, it would be a bloodbath, and he wouldn't be sure who would win among the entire FGC or Capcom's internal staff. That's how good these players are. All right, John, before we get started, I just want to tell everyone to hit the like button, please, on the channel. It helps so much if people don't mind doing it.
Did you say hit the like button?
Hit the... Oh, yeah, you might want to psycho crush the like button. Because, yeah, there it is. So thanks, everyone, if you can do that. And you might be exactly who's on this team. And that's a great question because the only person I'm pretty sure of is Washiga.
Washige?
Washigi. There you go. It's I'm trying to get the pronunciation out there correctly. See, I'm unsure of the pronunciation. I'm unsure of who's on this team, but I'm pretty sure that Washiga is on this team, and he got second at Evo, I believe, that one year. But he stood up in winners semis or winners finals and stuff like that before stuff was over. He can't count properly, but that does not mean he is not incredible at fighting games. And just to give a little bit of veracity to how strong these players are, they apparently play hundreds of matches a day. And the average Street Fighter V match lasts about for 2 minutes or so, put in load times, all that other kind of stuff there. So you combine all the statements that Capcom has made about this and do some quick math, and this team spends about 1/5 of their time each year, including sleeping, playing fighting games for Capcom. About 6 hours a day is what I came up to 5 days a week. A lot of time. And I don't know any other people out there on the planet whose job it is to play fighting games this much. They are flat out playing hundreds of matches a day on the clock and going and taking that stuff back to Capcom and saying, this is how the game should look, feel, play, and all that kind of stuff from a design balance standpoint. That is insanity, John. How does that make you feel? I can see the look on your face right now. How does...
Okay, so I want to imagine these as like the secret, ninja society assassins, right? And we've seen developers play games before. I think about like when NRS does their streams for Mortal Kombat characters, and we get to see like Derek and such play. But usually the developers are notably like not bad, but not great. It's like they understand the game, sure, but they're thinking about a lot more than just the character balance and devote a lot more of their time to other things, and so they end up being like they understand, they can probably articulate a lot about the characters, but to actually get them in their hands and do well with them, I think we're talking about different types of people. So I would want to get away from this idea of like, you're thinking about like Derek or whomever from NRS. It's like, it's not the same idea there. These are people, as I understand how you're pitching this, these are people that are just basically there to play the game, to try to break the game, right? To try to figure stuff out so that Capcom can get ahead of things. And it's one thing to release it out all into the wild and have thousands and thousands of people putting, tons of hours into it. You're going to find more, but these are the guys and girls that would be kind of figuring that stuff out beforehand. Is that fair?
Exactly. Yeah. They basically sign off on balance changes. They help implement everything. The battle balance is their main job. It
Okay.
is their job to make sure that these games, when the changes come out, like these characters work well with each other. All of our problems with Rashid can be laid at the feet of these people, probably.
Well,
And I'm
and
not
that's the
even
other thing.
joking
I'm
about
like, I'm
that.
not so
Yeah.
sure these
Mm.
people did a good job. And a lot of times at the beginning of Street Fighter V, there are clearly some things that they wanted to correct, some errors from Street Fighter 4 they wanted to get rid of, like option selects, and they wanted to make a commitment-based game. But then there were things in the game that I thought, okay, considering that you are building on your understanding of the last whatever it was 25 years at the time or 22 years, it's like, yeah, you're correcting some problems from the most recent game, but then all of a sudden you're okay with having anti-air jabs and having throw loops and having this input lag, and a lot of the things that I would have assumed would have been day one things that they would have figured out and said, oh yeah, this is something that we've learned a long time ago isn't okay, were in the game. So yeah,
Yeah, I
but
actually have a perfect response to that one from but first off, I agree with you that like it's, and this is why I want to hear from this team. I want to hear them directly address the stuff and say, "Hey, we left this in, or we did this, or we did that." And periodically we have the parts of this team, their notes are getting put into the patch notes, all that kind of stuff. Like, but we don't hear enough from them, right? But how that kind of goes down is there was a part where Yun was supposed to be tuned down heavily in Ultra Street Fighter 4. And instead they kind of made him better, and he ended up as kind of like one of the best characters in the game. I think like one of the patch notes said like Yun players were having trouble getting in, and so they're like they made him move better, and it was like um just so everyone knows who's listening to this, there are members of the battle design team who definitely did not sign off on that change and did not want that change to happen. But with politics and other stuff like that that happened at Capcom, that basically kind of got in there one way or another. Who wants to take the blame for that one and fall on that particular young grenade? I don't know. But you can say with a team of people, it's hard to come up with a consensus, right? It's hard for everyone to be on the same page and say, hey, Rashid really freaking sucks from a design standpoint. Let's not make him a featured character. And let's buff Cammy every single season. Those are, there are definitely people who agree with us on that kind of stuff. And, they of course look at our website or channel and all that, and, see what we're doing. But there is a whole politics game that you do have to play at Capcom to get some of this stuff through. It's not just a simple, hey, we have concrete proof of this and you should do it that way. Sometimes these changes don't get implemented
mhm.
that should.
Fair enough. I actually it's probably this team that this story is about, but I know that there is a story from back in probably 20s, end of 2016, early 2017, where a particular Capcom employee, uh, the Armika was in development, right? And she was perceived as okay. And this Capcom employee said, no, she is way overpowered. She's set play. She's got, remember from season one, Armika. And, but they weren't okay with changing. They said, no, Armika's just fine. And so this Capcom employee had to go to Japan and play against this team, and I assume it's this team, and show them how broken Armika actually was at the time. And after playing, then they upped they said, oh, okay, she's too strong. And then we got season two Armika where they obliterated her, and she's been trying to get back ever since. But again, if that story is indeed what happened and it is this team, I go, yeah, there's another example of them just totally being out of whack. And to your point though, maybe if they were more in touch with the community and communication with the community, we wouldn't have to like it wouldn't take them so long to learn some of these things because I don't think that they're completely helpless. I don't I if they're doing what you're saying they're doing, and I don't have any reason to think they are not, then I'm sure they have a total understanding of a lot of these things. But there are some examples where, gosh, guys, you really missed something, and it feels very obvious. So,
Well, also the people in the community for the most part aren't playing, 6 hours a day or whatever, and playing at the level that these players are. And so some of the things that work at lower levels of play and are really broken at lower levels of play than that, which is almost everyone. What is that? 99.9999% of people. Like, how many people are playing that much? I don't know if there's anyone who's playing that much. And sometimes the answer for a lot of these developers is get good. like we're playing, and it's like, look, that can't be your answer when
Oh,
you're
your
dealing with
answer to
players who
99.99% of your player base is no, you're
is get
wrong.
good. Yes,
Well,
exactly,
guess what?
exactly.
99.99% of your player base is going to go play Mortal Kombat now. So,
Yes. And that's where the stuff comes in. And again, it's not like they haven't made that adjustment. They very clearly have. Like, we've seen a lot of stuff. We've actually seen nerfs to Cammy and Rashid. Shocker. Like, it took them a long time, but they kind of figured it out that, oh yeah, when these characters are dominating in the main tournaments and online and everywhere else, we should probably tweak them a little bit. And so just to back up your story about Armika, same exact story, but same thing with Vanilla Sagat. 100% same thing happened. And well, some of the details changed, but regardless, the internal development team did not see Street Fighter 4 Vanilla Sagat as dominant of a character as he actually was. And again, it's amazing that they didn't see it, but yeah,
well, okay, but
it's
also,
funny.
what's the main thing that we remember when we think of Vanilla Sagat? We think about his damage output and then also his trade combos, because he
Yep.
would do anti-air. Was it his DP would trade, right, with
Yep.
jump ins, but
A
then he
lot,
would
bunch
be
of his stuff would trade, yeah, and go right into his ultra.
so well, but then he
So
would go into the forward kick and then into ultra. That's not a casual kind of a thing. That's not the 99% of players that are doing that kind of a thing. That's players that have figured stuff out. These guys would have been seeing that and would have been saying like, this is really strong. We should. And so if they were like, oh, we didn't catch that, or well, is that what they said?
and
We didn't catch that.
unless John, they never traded with anything. Their execution was so good and so on point that they never traded.
Yeah.
Well, I again, so I agree with you there. I'm being facetious, but it's amazing how sometimes when you get locked into your own little vacuums, how certain techniques and other stuff won't be seen as that powerful, but you get them into the hands of the masses with people with a very varied play style. And one of the things about this that I specifically noted about this team is at least the four people that were highlighted, they main about 4 or 5 characters. I mean one character, and I have a hell of a time doing that. 4 or 5 characters actively playing them and being extremely good with them is very hard to do. And shout outs to people like on the team, they actually do play Alex on there. That was noted a couple of times. There are people who play Alex. He's not a character they've completely forgotten about. They actually play him. But yeah, it's amazing how this stuff slips through the cracks because I'm in far more agreement than I'm in a disagreement, but I am giving you the reasons I've heard over the years of why this stuff has kind of slipped through. And one thing I've heard from every fighting game developer on the planet is battle balance is really hard to do. No one has perfect balance out there. It just doesn't exist. But I will say, because of the time that is put in and the style and the approach, I actually think, and this is where you're probably going to disagree with me heavily, I actually think Capcom has the best battle balance design team out there because of the amount of time that these players are putting in here and how good they are at their jobs. I'm not saying that, and I'm saying collectively. There are individuals at other companies who are amazing at this work too, but the amount of resources and time Capcom puts into this, I think, is the best in the industry. But their games are styled and structured very differently. People would say like, oh, Tekken and stuff like that. I'm like, well, Tekken doesn't have fireballs, like for the most part. Akuma's in there and other stuff like that, but the way fireballs work in Tekken is a night and day difference in a 2D fighting game. And so when your games have these different styles and other stuff, like, good luck to most people trying to balance V triggers, because that has been you can't pull V triggers out of the game at this point. They are what they are, and balancing has been really, really, really hard. And I think they've done a really good job now getting it in a line and having it play well. And if you look at the majority of the Street Fighter games, they have generally held up very well in terms of like not having any duds in the main series. Those have always been well played in the fighting game community, where you've had duds with some of the other games where they just, they went back to other titles and other stuff like that. That has happened. And with Street Fighter proper, it has been rare. And that is one of the reasons how come I think they're the best at what they do collectively as a group.
Mhm.
I think they do the best job. But sometimes, as we just discussed, those changes don't come up, don't actually get through.
Yeah. So okay. So you'd have to maybe if you could quantify and be like, well, this game has this bit, like quantify balance or something along those lines, which like, how are you going to do that? You might be able to make arguments for certain games being more balanced than Street Fighter games on average, but I widely don't disagree with you. I wouldn't rush to disagree there. Yes, Street Fighter has its balance problems, and I think we highlight them so much because it's such a popular game. It's at the top of the mountain. The wind's going to blow particularly hard. It's going to get highlighted every time there's an issue, and oftentimes there's a lot of emotion behind these things, so the issues are brought up with a little more heat than they maybe deserve. So we get this idea of it being like, oh man, it's just the worst. It's like, no, it's definitely not the worst. And they trend towards making things better. We've said a million times, the game's the best place it's ever been. They've figured things out, they've corrected mistakes, and I won't go too far into it right now, but I think that what they've begun to do with Luke is a huge, a really important direction for fixing some really big problems that they've been faced with in modern times. And I'm excited to see that. But my point is, I do think that the Street Fighter and Capcom are definitely in the running for best balance for fighting games. And I agree with you. Even as I sit, like for my job, a lot of it is sitting and considering, well, okay, if there's an issue here with balance, how would it get fixed? And if you're going to think about that seriously, you go, okay, well, if you fix it this way, what is the ripple effect and all of the different things that happen if you do this? And it's like, oh, well, three of those things it's okay, but the fourth thing is just going to break the game in this other avenue. So back to the drawing board, and very quickly you realize it's not a matter of just like a tiny tweak here or there. It's like a tiny tweak here and then see what happens, and then a tiny tweak there and see what happens, and maybe a big tweak here. But the
You
way
never know. It's you and I talk about this more than most people on the planet, like what changes should be done. And you and I tend to stay away from getting too specific about stuff because designing in a vacuum is impossible.
absolutely.
It is we've seen it so much, and you and I have been playing for a long time, where you tweak this one thing and all of a sudden five things are different, and it's like, oh man, this is so crazy. It's this is really hard to do.
Mhm.
It is really, really, really hard to do well. And
I'm
yeah.
careful to try to say every time we talk about like needing balance changes to say I do not envy the people that have to do this for their job, where it's like and their work is going to be assessed by the masses and such, and it's like it's so easy to just yell at them, no, but it's not easy to make this stuff work. And when it does work, and we've seen it work a lot, like that's amazing. That's a miracle. Maybe one step below a miracle, but that's amazing. And I think a lot of times we just go, oh yeah, that's good, do your job. It's like, no, you should appreciate that this thing works as good as it does. Just consider what you got.
So if this is the best team out there, I'd love to hear more from them,
Oh yeah.
especially again when heavy balance changes. They're coming in March, so let's hear what they're thinking now. Let's get Washiga up there and have him talk about it. Like with Takayuki Nakayama and Shuhei Masamoto, those are the two gentlemen who do the spring fall updates and stuff like that. They do a terrific job. I don't want to see anything change with those guys because I love hearing them talk about the games. They are brilliant. They're hardworking guys that are really good at what they do. I just want to see more, and I want to see more from the battle design team, who they're praising up and down, and we think they're the best. It's like, let's hear from these people, especially when we've got giant balance changes coming out. And this is not a call out. It's just like, hey, like Capcom has been wonderful actually about taking our suggestions in particular. Like we put them up on the site and here on the channel, and they put a lot of them in there. And this is just kind of like the next step. It's like, let your community know about stuff they're insanely passionate about. They want to hear from this stuff. And yeah, some people are going to complain, but at least we know when you've tweaked Falk like 5 things and stuff like that, we know why. We know the things that you're putting in there and what your intentions are for the character and what you're seeing. It's like hearing Punk or Idom talk about the games. It's like we want to hear what they have to say about Laura, Karen, all these other characters. Is like, well, if we're getting a fair and honest assessment, which with top players is sometimes a hit or miss type of prospect because they have a vested interest in their characters staying extremely good, but some players are really honest about them. Some players are not. It just kind of depends. But Capcom has every reason to be honest about these characters and what they're trying to do. And it's about transparency, especially from a team that's that good at what they do. Let's hear from them more. Not saying we've never heard from them. People are seeing footage here. This is, the battle design team playing right now, that you can see here on these clips. It's just, we want to see, we want to hear more from them as well, like especially when patches are coming out.
Yes, we also want our fans to psycho crush the like button.
Boom.
But yeah, I wanted to say on that. So we want to hear more from them. I would agree, and I think what we do hear from them already is, when the patch notes come out, they have been releasing little blurbs, like Vega was, we weren't seeing enough of this, and he's intended to have like this much offense, so we tweaked these things in order to help him realize this goal. We do get those little like paragraphs with each character, and I think that that's sort of in this realm of what you're talking about when you say you want to see more from these people. But so then I think of like what we get from the developers now, and there's these updates updates and they talk and they, sort of they open up a little bit, what would that look like if there was a segment on, say, the updates where these, part representatives from this team come up and say, okay, so this character has been going through this and we want this and here are some of our goals, and they don't have to show their entire hand, but they would have this communication with people, right? What does that specifically do for the community? Because the first thing that I see when that happens is people going, no, 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 it's not that, Cammy's jab is the issue, it's Cammy's this, and they didn't even talk about
Yep.
that. Like where besides just getting people upset and like disagreeing with them, what is the actual benefit from them kind of talking about where they're at? And I don't think that it's not going to be there, but it's not
Yeah, no, no.
immediately
First
apparent
off,
to me.
everyone's going to do that anyway. You could have the best explanation and 120%. We've always talked about this. Like if we give every single one of our audience $5, we get a bunch of people saying like, $5, you can't do anything with $5. Like, what the hell? Thanks for nothing, event hubs. And
Yeah.
it's like, yeah, it's just kind of the way it is with this stuff. So there's always going to be complaints no matter what. And it's just kind of rolling with that and realizing that's just how the community is. And that's how gamers are. They want to complain about something. But we actually had this back in Street Fighter 4 when they were doing the Ultra update or the AA update, and they grabbed 5 or 6 characters at a time, and they did a quick breakdown of the new additions that each character was getting and why. I believe Ayano led that one and did a really nice job. And they did that a little bit on CFN with Street Fighter 5, but they went away from it very quickly. And basically, I'd just like to see it back and done whenever we've got a major balance change coming in, like have a little bit of a ramp up with it, and then let us see what we're getting. But I get there's a lot of different builds behind the scenes. They are constantly tweaking stuff behind the scenes. And then you get the final version of it when you kind of get it. But at the same time, you have an idea what you're going to do with Falk. You have an idea what you're going to do with Cammy. It's not like it's completely directionless. You know that you have an idea. You're setting out to accomplish certain goals with certain characters. And having the developers talk about that, and even if stuff doesn't come to pass, just put the little caveat in there, hey, this stuff is subject to change. That's what they keep doing, right? And it's perfect. It's like, it's a great way. It's like seeing the footage of Rose, Dan, Luke, and all that kind of stuff in the hands of the developers before we got to play the characters. Here's how we design the characters. Here's how we think they should play. Go for it.
Mhm.
The community now, this is yours. Go ahead and take it and run with it. And it's same principle here. And just kind of like ignoring the people who are going to spout off and stuff on Twitter and other stuff. It's like, if you don't understand that Twitter is what it is at this point in time, like, what are you doing?
Yeah.
It's like people are always going to complain. Like, it's just, yeah.
Yeah, and so I can. It sounds like the benefit here would be one, more of a connection in the relationship between Capcom's fighting game department and its community, which I do think is a good thing. But like, if you're telling people where they're at or where you're at with what you want to do you think that then there's like more patience from the crowd when they see things, or they're like just happy to be talked to? And
Actually,
like,
it's education and transparency, and that's one of the things that we found consistently with human history. The more people are educated and the more transparent you are, the more they understand it and the more patience they have for it, because the explanations are apparent. And whether you want to subscribe to that or not, because there's certainly you can tell someone the sky is blue and they might want to argue it's brown for the longest time for whatever reason, right? There are those people out there, but for the most part, most people are like, oh, so that's what you're trying to do? Okay, well, that's fine. And people who are irrational and other stuff like that, you don't have to give them a lot of weight. You can kind of look at the
oh, and I'm not
overall.
worried about people like that are going to go crazy. Like, that's not part of my concern with all of this. I'm just trying to see what the overall benefit would be.
Yeah, your collective player base is basically being happier because they understand why these decisions were made.
Yeah.
It was like, why did you buff Cammy? And if they had a really good explanation for it, I would be less pissed off. But I highly doubt a really good explanation exists for that. I think it was much more of a, oh crap, we were tweaking her around a bunch and somehow we made her better like 17 times in a row. Are the CEO of Capcom as a Cammy player, and that's just the way it's going to be.
At least we would know.
At least you would know. It's kind of thing. It's like, okay, main Cammy because the CEO of Capcom really loves Cammy, and that's just how it's going to be. And that's fine. At least we know. So,
Fair enough.
and if the CEO of Capcom's a Blanca player, sorry, man, I don't know what's going on there either. So, but anyway.
That's the worst timeline.